In the name of Allah, I would like to welcome dear professors, dear Dr. Na'man and dear Dr. Wi'am for attending this seminar. Our seminar will be about second language acquisition. And today I will explain the procedures and principles of second language acquisition and how we are learning a second language. First of all, I would like to have a revision of the first language acquisition. We already discussed the first language acquisition and how babies or children acquire the language. And we have discussed the first language acquisition with babies and the effect of repetition and the mother language and the stages that thank you for reminding me. The stages that the child goes through to learn the language. There are many situations that in which we are in which some people are in to learn. They are actually fortunate to have a situation in which they learn two languages at the same time. So, for example, the people in the north of Iraq, for example, they learn Kurdish and their Arabic language at the same time. These are called bilingual. And once I have met a Pakistani citizen, he told me that there is a city in Pakistan in which they learn 5 languages at the same time. So it's a fortune, because it is in the beginning of learning. It is within the first language acquisition time or period. So today we are going to talk about the second language acquisition, as we said. Let's go first to identify the basic terms of second language acquisition. We have seen in different situations the EFL and ESL, and sometimes are used interchangeably, but they are different. So English as a foreign language, which is said as EFL. The difference between EFL and ESL is that once we are learning, for example, English, in a situation out of the language used, let's say. So when learners, our situation now, we are a foreign language learners. Why? Because English language is not used out of the class or out of the situation we are in. So the language we are learning is a foreign one. While if the same attendance here, or the same class here is learning the language in the UK, for example, or in the United States of America, it will be a second language learner, because learners will have a chance to use the language out of the class. Let's now distinguish between the two terms, acquisition and learning. Okay, I would like to have address a question. Who can tell me what is the difference between acquisition and learning? Who has an idea? Yes.
Acquisition, it's the language that the children get from the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
They have it, their surrounding, they use the same language.
Mm-hmm.
For example, now when you said that it's from the beginning of the childhood, the children get it and use it, not know what it is about.
Uh-huh.
But learning, I would say, is that you study the knowledge and about the language, how to use it, where to use it, the grammar, the linguistics.
Thank you very much. To make it as short as possible, language acquisition is the gradual, as Giorgio says, the gradual development of language.
It starts from the chapter.
That starts from childhood. While learning is the accumulation of knowledge.
Yeah.
So it says that, for example, mathematical class. Is it acquired or learned? Of course it is learned, because there is no gradual development. Okay. Due to the shortage of time, I will be so brief. Learning activities and acquisition activities. Let's now imagine the situation in which we are learning and the situation in which we are acquiring language. And how that affects our second language learning. And as teachers, we will be teaching, is it a foreign language or a second language? We will be teaching what? We will be teaching a foreign language, because it's out of the context, as we said. So these things will be very, very useful when it comes to teaching, because it gives a deeper understanding. So the activities of learning. The situation of learning is based on time, on schedule. Once you go to school, once you go to college, you will be taught in English class for not more than 2 hours, for example. But with the acquisition, you will be taught the whole time. You will be learning the language, you will be communicating the whole time. Okay. The activities with learning is, as we said, the learning is accumulation of knowledge. So you will have more knowledge, but you will less use the language. You will have the grammar rules, you will have vocabulary, but you won't be able to use the language interchangeably. The learning activities are demonstrated by tests, in paper and pencil tests, whereas the acquisition is demonstrated by social interaction and the actual use of language in the community. So, what do you think? Which type of experience or exposure? The exposure, I mean, how much you will be in touch with the language. Will it be for short time in the class or in the community? You'll be talking the whole time. So, which is best? Learning or acquisition? And why? Yes.
Acquisition, because it helps the student to interact with with the society. And when someone uses the language to communicate wherever he goes, it will develop his language. It will help him to use new words, new vocabularies, know the grammar, how to use grammar without knowing the rules itself. So it's acquisition is better than learning from itself.
Thank you very much. Indeed it is. Indeed. Now, as we mentioned, the difficulties or the first language acquisition and second language acquisition. And there are some scientists that say that after adolescent time, so from the birth time until the adolescence, and after this time, it is very difficult to learn a second language. I remember something. Just yesterday, someone told me, someone saw that I was reading English and says, "Oh, you're learning English? It's a very difficult one. I have been failed to test 4 times in a row." So we would have a kind of a question. what make this language or learning a language so difficult? Scientists say that after the critical period, they call it a critical period. George call it a critical period. The critical period starts from the birth, from the very, very beginning birth, until the adolescence. Until the adolescence. From this time, you are able to learn a language because of two factors. The first is that the left hemisphere in the brain, the left hemisphere in the mind is still open, let's say,
Yes.
is still open to acquire, to receive,
Yes.
to receive more knowledge. And moreover, if you are exposed to the language, if you're exposed to the community in which the language is used, you will be able to learn the language. So now, there are certain difficulties or barriers or obstacles that face our process in learning. In learning, I say, not in acquisition. You have to differentiate it between acquisition and learning. So first, time. The time of exposure is very, very short. And the age, as we said, the critical period. And once you're students, you don't have the whole time. You don't have the whole time to learn the language. You have other things to do. You have other materials to study. You have, for example, a work. So, shortage of. And the first language. Since you have a language that you can use to communicate, you will be dependent on that language. So some teachers try to explain the language, for example, in our context, in Arabic. So the use of the foreign language is lessened. Okay, so John. So it says that language elements from our discussion now, we can come to a conclusion that language elements such as grammar and vocabulary are easier to learn than pronunciation, for example. Pronunciation needs more practice, needs more exposure to the language. This is the critical period I have already mentioned. But some scientists or some researchers disagree on the fact that learners have difficulties in learning after the adolescence. There are some studies that demonstrated that learners from the age of 10 to 16 learns the language better than learners of age 7, for example. But why is that? Yes, you seem the only one participant here. Yes.
Because in this period, there is a development in our mind. As I think, there is development in our mind, and this development helps us to, when we receive an information, it's all kept in our mind, so we can develop it through time. I mean, the knowledge we get will develop with our development of mind.
So imagine our mind have a door.
Yeah.
Have a door. And from the beginning, from the birth until the adolescence, it is open. After the adolescence, it is closed. So in this time, I mean the age of 10 to 16, is it still open? The door or the gate is still open for learning and acquiring new features of language. And this is one factor. Another factor is our cognitive skills, the skills that are in our mind, are enough to help us with the L2, the second language features. Now let's go to the affective factors. Acquisition barriers with teenagers. Let's divide the barriers between teenagers and children. Okay, let's now discuss the teenager. Okay. There are some learners that might say, I want to learn the language, but I don't want to seem like American. Or I want to learn French, for example, but I don't like the r sounds that they make. I just hate it. So this is called the emotional reaction toward learning a language, or the attitude. So if the learners are unwilling to learn, or sometimes embarrassed when trying to learn, when trying to produce the sounds of the foreign language, this will be a barrier for them, a barrier or obstacle stopping them from their advancement in the language. And this is in some way caused by the situation of learning. Either the books, the textbooks, are not helpful. So I remember by the time we were learning English, the book is a matter of lines and just words without any pictures or illustrations, and a very, very dull kind of a book. And the classroom, the situation of the classroom, is uninteresting. And they condense the schedule. This is the factors that may affect the emotion of the learners. But with children, is it the same? Of course not. Because the conscience of children is not the same as teenagers. They would overcome these obstacles or barriers. Some studies addressed this problem of that adults have the emotional barriers. So they give them, they made them in a situation of learning, of producing pronunciation, and they gave them alcohol. They gave them alcohol. So by the time they are affected by alcohol, they produced correct pronunciation. But by the time they increased the drinks, they lost this production of correct pronunciation. So this solution, yes?
Can we say it's because that he's unconscious, he's
Yes,
not
of course.
nervous to pronounce the letter or
Of
the
course.
sounds. When he drinks alcohol, he forgets everything, so the nervousness...
He won't be emotional
Yeah.
anymore. But when they go back to their
real
it's called tintatalism. Tintatalism is a very, very funny word. They are still conscious, and again they are conscious again. They lost their correct pronunciation.
Yeah.
I would like to thank you all for your listening, and I wish that it was a kind of benefit for you. Thank you very much.